Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me. It is a privilege and honor to have the opportunity to speak with you today. First, I want to say thank you so much to GC America for their support and making this webinar possible. A little bit about myself before we begin. My name is Dr. Karen Halpern. My practice is Port Jefferson Smiles. It's located in Long Island, New York. Here's a picture of my amazing team, who I'm always very proud of. For those of you who know me, know I am very passionate about using the latest tech available to provide our patients with the best level of care. I've been using Esthetic in my practice since 2012, and it's absolutely revolutionized the way I practice and my patients' experience. Today, I would like to speak to you about some of the latest CAD materials available to us and how we can breathe life into them after milling and create the most natural restorations possible. As CAD/CAM dentists, it's more important than ever before that we educate ourselves on all of the different materials available. In order for us to achieve the best results in both strength and aesthetics, we must first learn the properties of the different materials available. We need to understand their indications, contraindications, and properties. It can be overwhelming at first. The first category of materials I'd like to talk about are the blocks known as the hybrid blocks. These blocks are called hybrids because they combine the characteristics of ceramics and composite. Some examples of the blocks that are in the category include Lava Ultimate by 3M, Vita Enamic by Vita, Cerismart by GC America, among some others. So, why should we choose to use a hybrid block? One great advantage of the hybrid blocks is that they have a fast mill time. Cerismart mills really quick, 12 minutes for a crown on a molar, and on fast mill it's even less. It's also very gentle on our milling burrs. Unlike some of the other materials like Emax and zirconia, with hybrid resin blocks, there's no need for sintering or crystallization, which cuts down on our chair time significantly. So let's take a look at a few of these blocks side by side. As seen in this slide, Cerismart has a nano ceramic matrix with an even distribution compared to the others in its class. Its unique homogeneous matrix combines the best characteristics of both a high-strength ceramic and composite. What's great about Cerismart is it mills beautifully with virtually no chipping when compared to the other nano-hybrid blocks, as well as Emax and Vita Mark II. You can see the differences in these images. Cerismart mills with virtually no chipping. Here's a case by my friend and mentor, Dr. Bob Conti, who milled a veneer down to razor-thin margins of 1/2 millimeter without any chipping. When compared to other blocks, such as Emax, Lava, Empress, and Vita, Cerismart was only second to Emax in flexural strength, but the best breaking energy of all. Another unique property of CeraSmart is that it's a true self-polishing material. It simply stays polished longer. In a 1-year toothbrush test, polished CeraSmart maintained a gloss surface after a year of toothbrush wear, and roughened CeraSmart even recovered to the same level as the polished surface in a year. So the clinical indications for CeraSmart include inlays and onlays, crowns, and it's also important to note that unlike Lava Ultimate, which is no longer indicated for crowns, you can do crowns with CeraSmart. Long-term provisionals, and I love to use it for this indication. This may be while a patient is seeing the endodontist for a root canal or the periodontist for crown lengthening. I love using this material for temps, and I'll cement them in for the interim with Duralon. This provides me with adequate retention, and it's very easily removable with GC pliers. Another great indication is for no-prep veneers. Later, I'll show you a case where PEG laterals were restored using CeraSmart on a teen. Some of the attractive features of CeraSmart are that it's natural looking, radio opaque, it has a high radiopacity, where Vita Enamic has a low radiopacity. It's easy to polish, it's self-polishing, it's highly wear resistant, flexible, tough, and fracture resistant. CeraSmart also exhibits opalescence and fluorescence, which really mimics our natural tooth enamel. You can see here how close it is to the natural tooth image shown in this diagram. Here's a photo I took of CeraSmart inlay that I milled in my office. This was milled on fast mill. You can see how lifelike it is in respect to how the light hits it. So let's talk about its fabrication properties a little bit. This chart is illustrating the sequence of steps for the fabrication. So first, we select our shade, then scan, design, and mill, and then finish and polish. We go to apply our stain and glaze, apply our primer, and cement. Another great feature of CeraSmart is it can be maintained and repaired if needed with the Genial Flow resin. This flowable composite shares the same nanotechnology as CeraSmart does. So if you want to repair a CeraSmart restoration, you simply need to roughen the bonding area using a diamond or carbide burr. Then you go ahead and apply GC2 primer and then just restore it with your composite resin of choice. Genial Flow is recommended to make the surface homogeneous. This flow handles extremely well. It's not runny, it stays where you place it. You can use it for Class 1 through Class 4 restorations, pit and fissure sealants, and bases and liners. It's my go-to flow. Now let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the shade options that are available. So like the other nano ceramic resin blocks in its class, CeraSmart also comes in a high translucency and a low translucency. There are 6 shades available, and they all come in the HT and the LT, except for the bleach shade. And we have all of the A shades up to A3.5, B1, and bleach. It comes in 3 sizes, the 12, 13, and 14, the 12, 14, and 14F. So how you're all doing? I hope all of my CEREC peeps are still with me. So next, I want to talk about preparation guidelines. It's so important we understand how to prep properly for both the milling machine's capabilities and the materials properties. If we have a rough prep with undercuts and a perfect scanner design, we will still get garbage results. If we have a perfect prep and fail to scan what we need, again, we will get garbage results. At the end of the day, it's up to us to master the tech and give us the best fitting restorations. The prep guidelines for CERESmart crowns are similar to those for our other CEREC milled restorations. Minimal thickness needed is 1.5 millimeters for your walls, cusps, and pit and fissure areas, and we need to have 1 millimeter for our marginal thickness. Deep chamfer around the shoulder is preferred, a 6-degree taper, and always round internal line angles and smooth preparations, just like for all our CEREC preparations. So what I always say for us CEREC dentists is you can never over prep. So let's talk now about the preparation guidelines for inlays and onlays. As with all our milled restorations, time and attention must be paid to the design and the execution of the preparation. For inlays and onlays, it's important that the preparation have draw with no undercuts, especially in the interproximal box. The floor of the prep should be flat, internal line angles round and smooth, occlusal margins should not coincide with the occlusal contacts. Straight exit walls on the interproximal, and always avoid leaving prep margins on our centric occlusal stops. These are my favorite burrs for my inlay and onlay preparations by Brasler. For CERESmart cementation, the R&D results have shown there's no statistical difference between sandblasting or using hydrofluoric acid when it comes to physical properties. I like to sandblast my CERESmart restorations and steam clean them, and then I'll go ahead and apply the GC Ceramic Primer too. And I will either use the GC Link Force Dual Cure Resin Cement or NX3 Resin Cement by Kerr. Let's take a look at some clinical examples. Here's a CERESmart HT inlay I placed on tooth number 30. You can see here how nicely the margins blend and seem to disappear into the tooth. It really looks so natural. In this case, the patient presented with a leaking, failing amalgam and a distal marginal ridge crack on number 14. As you can see here, my prep has draw, smooth internal line angles, and no undercuts. I also used a resin base, and I placed that on the floor to create my smooth pulpal floor. Here is the same preparation then scanned with my CEREC Omnicam. One of the challenges of milled inlay restorations is managing the removal of the sprue. Since the restoration is so small, often the only broad enough area available for the sprue placement is in the contact area. You need to carefully remove the sprue without unintentionally removing your contact. I like to use a pencil to outline the sprue and use it as a reference line. Once I remove the sprue, I will try in the restoration to check the fit and contacts. You have to be careful to avoid dropping the restoration or have it go flying out of the patient's mouth upon removing it. I find these stick-in-place disposable adhesive applicators help out a lot. Once the fit is verified, then you can go ahead, do your staining and glazing with OptiGlaze color. You can see how lifelike the restoration looks after stain and glaze when it's compared to what it looks like when it comes fresh out of the mill. The restoration is then prepared with the G-Multi primer and then cemented using dual cure bonded protocol for GSEM link force cement. The enamel of the prep was etched with 35% phosphoric acid for 20 seconds and then rinsed and air dried. G-Primeo Bond and G-Primeo Bond Activator were mixed in a 1-to-1 ratio and then applied to my prep for 20 seconds and then air dried for 5. The GSEM link force cement was then loaded into a tube and plug into a composite gun, and then the prep gets filled about 2/3 of the way with the resin, and the inlay is seated using the stick-in-place applicator. And then go ahead, tack cure for 2 seconds, clean up the excess bulk cement, floss, apply glycerin gel to prevent my oxygen-inhibited layer, and then final cure is done for 40 seconds. This is another great application of CeraSmart. This is a case that was completed by Dr. Bob Conti. This was a 15-year-old with PEG laterals. Here, it was decided to make 2 no-prep veneers until the teen is done growing, when she can transition to something more permanent. Without any preps, Dr. Conti imaged and then marginated manually. Here, CeraSmart was used because it can be repaired with composite if needed, and it also mills out these razor-thin margins. You can see what a beautiful natural result he was able to achieve. This is so much better than hand stacking the composite directly. So now I'd like to spend some time talking with you about how we can stain and glaze using OptiGlaze color. OptiGlaze color is so versatile and it has so many wonderful applications. It is a must-have in the office. Some of the applications include staining and glazing the hybrid blocks, direct composite, which is great for our anterior composite restorations, acrylic, denture teeth, and even PMMA and provisional restorations. The kit is organized into 4 categories. You have clear, opaque, your modifiers, and then your shade shifts. It has 2 clear glazes. The clear HV stands for high viscosity. It has 2 opaque shades, which are your white and your ivory, and all the remaining shades are translucent. The shade shifts are to change your values for your A shade, B shade, and C shade. And if you want to do something for a D shade, I would use the olives. So, does it last over time? The answer is yes. It retains its gloss value wonderfully over time. This chart shows that after brush wear of 50,000 times, the OptiGlaze color retained its gloss value. Comparatively, look how little the gloss value maintained on a denture base. We're able to characterize our restorations and create the appearance and illusion of it being polychromatic with the OptiGlaze color kit. Shade shifting, or changing the value of our restorations, can also be achieved with the A+, the B+, or the C+. As you can see here, you can go from an A2 to an A3.5, a C3 to a C4, and vice versa. We have two ways on how we can apply it. We can either stain and glaze on the bench, or we can also stain and glaze intraorally, either after cementing our indirect restorations or on our direct composite restorations. So, how do we recreate nature with our staining and glazing? Let's go through the steps used to stain and glaze this Ceresmart crown with the OptiGlaze color kit and create a natural, lifelike restoration. Here is the Ceresmart crown, just shown in the previous slide, right after it was milled. Once it's milled, we need to first remove the sprue, then lightly sandblast with 25 to 50 micron aluminum oxide, and then steam clean or use an ultrasonic cleaner and rinse it really well. Then you want to apply your ceramic primer 2 over the entire surface. This will allow for the better adhesion of the OptiGlaze stain and glaze. And then once you apply it, you just let it air dry. Here are the colors that I like to use for the majority of my Ceresmart restorations: blue, red-brown, A+ or B+, ivory, and clear. The kit does come with its own brushes. However, my favorite brushes that I like to use for all of my staining and glazing are shown here. They are the Syntec brushes, and they're from Smile Line USA. It's important to note that you should use 91% isopropyl alcohol to clean your brushes. Never, ever use water. So first, I go ahead and I apply the red-brown stain into the central fossa for occlusal staining, and that gives the illusion of depth. Then the blue stain is applied to the cusps to create a natural effect of enamel translucency. You don't want to be heavy-handed with this. With the blue, if you're wearing loops, you should be able to see the blue. But if you take your loops off, you should barely see the blue. That will give you the best effect. A+ is also then applied to the cervical third to add some chroma. I'll place ivory on the lobes and the marginal ridges to add highlights. Finally, a coat of clear glaze is applied to the entire surface and light cured. In between the application of each stain, I also will go ahead and tack cure it with my curing light for 5 seconds. The GC LED light 405 has the ideal wavelength to cure OptiGlaze. The range that's acceptable is anywhere between 400 to 430 nanometers. After I finish applying the clear glaze to the entire restoration, I'll go ahead and do my final cure for 40 seconds. Here is a picture showing the A+ added to the cervical 1/3. Here you can see there's a big difference between the CeraSmart right out of the mill and after we've gone ahead and characterized, stained, and glazed with the OptiGlaze color and put our fingerprint on it. It's a pretty significant change. We can fool the eye and make it look like something that is monochromatic looks polychromatic. I wanted to share with you some other clinical photos of other applications for the OptiGlaze color. Here's a photo illustrating the use of OptiGlaze color on a provisional resin implant crown to provide the look of the final prosthetic in terms of both chroma and value. Here's another clinical case showing what could be achieved using OptiGlaze color on a screw-retained provisional implant bridge. This was created by my technician, Bill Murray. For a simple finish, you can just simply use OptiGlaze Clear all by itself. You just apply a thin coating and it won't change over time. Here's that same bridge from the previous slide, and you can see it is truly a long-lasting glaze that is wear resistant because this photo was taken in the mouth after it was in the mouth for over 3 months. This is how the patient presented. The surface remained very clean and there was no staining. Here's another long-term PMMA provisional bridge that was characterized, stained, and glazed using the OptiGlaze color by my technician, Bill Murray. This is that same provisional bridge photographed after 6 months of being in the mouth. This patient spent half a year in Florida and was in the bridge until she returned back to New York. Here's a case in which I used OptiGlaze color to custom stain and glaze a maxillary flipper on tooth number 10. This patient has a lot of characterization and tints in his natural teeth, and a monochromatic denture tooth just wouldn't match. Okay, so I'd like to shift gears now and speak to you about some of the ceramic material choices. What are they? We have 3 main categories of milled ceramics available. Glass ceramics, which is our feldspar, so those are like your Vita blocks. Glass ceramics with fillers, which would be the lucite reinforced and lithium disilicate, and then the glass-free ceramics, which would be our zirconia. In the lucite reinforced, we have Empress and GC Initial LRF. We also, in the lithium disilicate, we have and no Emax. So many choices. How can we choose? Flexural strength. Zirconia is the strongest at approximately 1120 megapascals. This also can vary too, based on the sintering time and the type of zirconia. But do we really need that much strength? For comparison's sake, a PFM has approximately 80 megapascals of flexural strength. Let's talk now about a newer kit on the block, the GC Initial LRF block. It's a lucite reinforced feldspar ceramic block. It has the aesthetics of a traditional feldspathic porcelain. The lucite reinforcement adds strength and prevents marginal chipping. It's fast and easy, and you can just polish and cement it. Polished alone, it's about 200 megapascals, but if you do decide to go ahead and glaze and fire it, the strength actually increases to 250 megapascals. It has an excellent surface quality, extremely smooth surface right out of the milling, and like I said earlier, the firing is not necessary, so that does also save time. It also has a beautiful chameleon effect. So what are the indications and the shades available? So you can use it for single anterior posterior crowns, veneers, inlays and onlays, and we can have it in HT or LT and a bleach shade, A1 to A3.5, B1, and our bleach. So let's also just review some of the contraindications, because since it's not as strong as Emax or zirconia, it's definitely not indicated for our grinders. So hyperfunction and grinding and clenching are contraindicated. Endo crowns on premolars, and it's contraindicated for bridges. As far as prep guidelines, the prep should have a round shoulder or a deep chamfer, a knife edge, feather edge, jump margin, undercuts, those are all contraindicated. An isthmus width of at least 1.5 millimeters should be observed in your fissure area. And avoid having margins in direct occlusal contact with your opposing tooth. This is a great reference chart that explains when to choose the high translucency versus the low translucency. So for high translucency, that's going to be your thinner preps that have a normal color prep. If you're doing something that is adjacent to a PFM, a thicker restoration, discolored prep, metal underneath that you need to mask, that's when you're going to look to use your LT. What's great about the GC Initial LRF block is since you don't need to fire it, but you can get a beautiful look just by polishing it. This is just polished in this picture. I prefer to use this kit from DyeShine for my finishing and polishing of my ceramic restorations. First, you need to remove the sprue with the greenstone wheel at 7,000 to 9,000 RPM, and you're going to use a light contact pressure. Then you're going to remove the burr marks and pre-polish with a Diaflex medium wheel. If you're going to add texture, you can do so after this pre-polishing step with your texturing burr. Next, polish with Dye-Shine Fine Paste and the stiff bristle brush from the kit at 7 to 10,000 RPM over the entire restoration using some moderate pressure. Next, dry buff with the chamois brush at 10,000 RPM. As you can see, what a high gloss and polished surface you can achieve with this material. You can also characterize and stain and glaze your GC initial LRF restorations. So for the glaze, you only want to use the LRF glaze paste for this. Always stir the initial LRF paste before you use it. The GC initial spectrum stains also can be added, and you can mix them directly into your glaze paste. And when you're done, you're going to place it on the GC firing foam and firing pin with a honeycomb tray, and you cannot use an Emax firing tray for this. Here are the firing parameters for the GC initial LRF block for the furnace that I use, which is Ivoclar's Programmat. For the Ivoclar furnace, you will need to enter a custom program using these parameters. So for your B, which is your preparing temp, you want to set that to 450. The S value, which is the time for the hood to close, is 4 minutes. The small t, which is the rise in temp per minute, is 45. H, or your holding time, is 1 minute. T, the final temp, is 850. And then go ahead and set your V1 to 450, and your V2 is set to 849. Prior to cementing the restorations, you're going to go ahead and prepare them with hydrofluoric acid for 60 seconds and then proceed with silination. As far as your cementation guidelines, if it's non-retentive, you want to do a total bond, and you can go ahead and for an adhesive resin cement like the GC Link Force, that's what's going to be your preferred choice. Here's a clinical case I did for crowns on numbers 7 through 10. This patient, she had worn incisal and palatal wear on number 8 with some failing lingual resins, and also had some recurrent decay onto her adjacent existing crowns. Here are her pre-op photos. So first, I begin with a diagnostic wax-up. What does the diagnostic wax-up provide for our anterior cases? It helps to establish the incisal edge positions and our incisal embrasures. The 3 facial planes and the 3 facial lobes. And it defines our embrasures, our emergence profile, and texture, but most of all, it gives us individuality and character. Here are the preparations, and the recorded prep shade was a close to an A3 shade. Next, I scanned the wax up using my CEREC Omnicam, scanned the preps, and then stitched to get my initial proposals. Here's a screenshot of the wax up stitched over my preparations. So the next step was to select my shade and translucency. So for this case, since I did not have a very discolored abutment, nor a very thick restoration, I decided to use high translucency, and I went with the shade A1, with the goal of staining and glazing it to be between A1 and A2 as my final shade. I used a putty index created off the wax up and fabricated temporaries with Luxitamp and dismissed the patient. I then went ahead and sent the case to my lab via CEREC Connect and ordered a printed model to use as a working model for me to finish the restorations on the lab bench. Here are the restorations right out of the mill. Next, like always, the sprues are removed. Then I removed any burr marks and pre-polished the Diaflex medium wheel from the DiaShine CAD Essentials kit. Next, I used contact paper to mark the contacts and adjusted them accordingly. I then needed to start creating texture and adjusting my facial anatomy. I had increased the marginal thickness in the cervical third where the biocopy scan of the wax up in the Omnicam was a bit deficient, so it needed to be manually adjusted after the mill. I then went ahead and I stained and glazed the restorations using the GC Initial LRF glaze paste and my Spectrum stains. Here are the restorations after firing and before my final polishing. Then I began polishing the DiaShine fine paste. And next, I do a dry polish with the chamois buff. After cementation, I go ahead and I polish again, and this is something called DiaShine intraoral paste, and it's something that I use intraorally after everything's been cemented. It is a great polish. So here are the final restorations. I think the chameleon effect of the GC initial LRF block is evident in these photos. They just seem to blend in very well, and they really look lifelike and natural. Some final photos of both the retracted and the full smiling. The patient was happy, and so was I. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. I thank you so much for spending your time with me today. I hope you learned some new things that you can go back and implement in your practice right away. I'll now be available for the next few minutes to try to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you so much. Okay, so one of the questions is, does OptiGlaze create occlusal interference when applied? And the answer is no. Okay, so there's no other questions. Thank you so much, and have a great evening or afternoon.